I say it in almost every video, but it is absolutely insane what is happening in the crypto market at the moment. Bitcoin is heading towards the $100,000, absolutely historic moments that we can celebrate at this point in time. In addition, Nvidia's quarterly figures have turned out very positive, which could certainly boost some AI projects again. Exactly because of this, I see gigantic opportunities in the coming days and weeks. It is simply essential to focus on the right projects now. In today's video, I have also prepared some new projects for you, not just the usual classics that I always mention on my YouTube channel, but today also specifically new ones in a certain subcategory, especially regarding decentralized agents, which in my opinion is a completely new industry that is now emerging. We see it through some prime examples. Here, I will also present my own thesis on how I am currently acting in the market, which opportunities I am taking advantage of at this moment, because I believe that especially at this time, every smallest decision, really just every tiny reallocation or right decision in one's own portfolio, have gigantic effects in the coming weeks and months. We are on the verge of this parabolic upswing in the altcoin market, and I can well imagine that the trend is also returning to AI coins, to utility projects, and that new liquidity is being injected into these sectors again. Of course, we have seen in the last few weeks that meme coins have also performed very well. But in my opinion, a clear shift is currently taking place also back to some AI projects. I also see it in my own portfolio or based on examples that I will show in today's video, so make sure to stay until the end today. It is really very important that you listen attentively here and of course pick up all possible information. Otherwise, it should be said, you might notice it on me. I have completely red eyes. I have been awake for over 28 hours. I specifically sat down again. I have just landed here in Dubai. You can probably tell by the background as well. In any case, I made the effort to set up my setup here so that another video comes out for you. So at this point, of course, if you enjoy my content, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. The last videos were received incredibly well by you, so a big thank you goes out at this point. We have some like rates of 100%, so it's really absolutely crazy what's happening on my YouTube channel. Otherwise, we will jump directly into the content. Just a brief note regarding Bitcoin, so I don't want to go too much into the general market situation. I think you probably watch other YouTubers who cover every little piece of news in their videos anyway. For me, at this point in time, it is much more important what my own strategy is doing, what my own performance in the portfolio is, and it is simply important for me to put out this update video for you. As I said, Bitcoin is just before which will of course be extremely positive later for the altcoin market, and please, all altcoin investors, please be patient, just because the stronger and the more liquidity flows into Bitcoin now, the stronger and more powerful the altcoin season will also be. I notice it in the comments, I notice it in the groups, and generally based on the mood that many are now annoyed, many are becoming impatient with their own portfolio because perhaps the desired performance is not yet present at this time, because let's be clear, Bitcoin is outperforming certain altcoins. And of course, one logically asks oneself, hey, am I doing something wrong here? Why is nothing growing in my own portfolio? But please just be patient here, and you should even be glad that nothing is happening with the altcoins at the moment, because the longer the season drags on with Bitcoin, the longer liquidity can be concentrated in Bitcoin, the more powerful the altcoin season will be. It is so important to understand this. I have a tweet prepared for later as well, so you can see how the whole scheme roughly works. So as I said, feel free to follow me on Twitter, where I will also regularly provide updates for you, but it is simply essential to understand the cycles, the liquidity rotations in the market, that when Bitcoin is rising at this point in time, and additionally the Bitcoin dominance is also increasing, the altcoins will simply weaken a bit. This is completely normal and is part of every cycle. It was exactly the same in the last cycle, so I also have the feeling, sure, many are new now, and you can't really blame them for getting worried and panicking, especially as a newcomer. I felt the same way at the beginning. But that's why it is so important for me to educate you here on my YouTube channel and for you to stay true to your own strategy so that you don't become panicked or make the wrong decisions just before the parabolic upswing happens with the altcoins. That's why it is essential for me to shoot these videos for you. As I said, Bitcoin, it's unbelievable. We have even broken out of this upward trend channel, making higher interim lows and higher interim highs. So actually similar to what was expected, as explained in the other videos, but that's beside the point. Let's continue with the actual news. Why am I making this video today, and what prompts me to talk specifically about AI coins again today? Simply because we saw the Nvidia earnings, which were actually significantly above expectations again, and it is incredibly positive because Nvidia is thus the most important stock in the traditional financial markets. There are also some memes on Twitter that show how Nvidia is somewhat saving the entire traditional market, that is the entire stock market. Everything depends on Nvidia, so you can roughly say maybe it's a bit exaggerated, but you can imagine Nvidia as the Bitcoin of the crypto market. Nvidia is somewhat the driving force, and the other stocks, and I would say the overall stock market, depend a bit on it. Because of course, AI, and especially things like decentralized cloud computing, all the GPU chips needed to train AIs, are relevant for the coming weeks and months, especially for the overall AI market. Thus, Nvidia is the largest stock worldwide that covers this area, and that's why I also see a clear driving force or a clear trend that can now be transferred to the crypto market. I have prepared a short example for you so that each of you can understand it. Back when ChatGPT was released, we had a similar effect as a catalyst, essentially the overarching catalyst. ChatGPT was released, making it the first AI that became truly accessible to the general public, and then we saw an incredibly parabolic rise in some projects days and weeks later. In this case, I have simply taken Fetch AI as an example, but we can also take a look at it. Back then, it was approximately, I believe, a 15x, exactly a 16x that Fetch AI achieved, and I can actually imagine something similar happening again at this point, that some AI projects will follow suit. I have also kept my own statistics here, or rather verified things, on how the last Nvidia earnings affected the crypto market. And it was indeed the case, one must keep this in mind, that every time, in this case from bid to ask, I'm just using it as a reference point, USEN is one of the largest projects, and we saw that every time Nvidia's earnings were released, we experienced an increased sell-off, which was also due to the fact that at times the expectations were too high back then. But now we are completely meeting the expectations, and I can very well imagine that the trend will be sustainably broken here. You can already see the first signs in the projects. We can zoom into the 4-hour chart. Of course, this is observed on a very small time frame, but in my opinion, the trend is slowly but surely being broken here, and if major drivers like Fetch AI gain momentum again, I can well imagine that it will boost the entire market. As I said, I see it based on my own projects that some AI coins are starting to gain momentum again, and that's why it's essential to prepare now before everyone jumps on the bandwagon again when Elon Musk talks about some AI robots or anything else that could also serve as a catalyst for AI projects to continue performing well. That's why we will now talk about some altcoins, including some larger altcoins later on. So the longer the video goes on, the further back you watch the video, the smaller the projects become, the more risk you have, but correspondingly the more potential there is. And we will also talk about my personal strategy, how I am positioning myself at the current time, and which projects I have recently purchased. But here, as the first project, Neo Protocol is actually one of the largest AI projects with a market cap of nearly 7 billion, and I can easily imagine that the big horses will rise first. So you can of course also stay true to your own strategy, and that is also what I always preach on my own YouTube channel. The way I personally approach it is to mainly invest in hidden gems, meaning really small cap projects that have a market capitalization of 300 million and less. So that is my personal approach, but in my opinion, it is also okay if, as a beginner or simply as a certain anchor in your own portfolio, you possibly include new, larger AR projects. We also see clear breakouts here, so in this case we have a beautiful 1000-picture book chart in front of us, a nice symmetrical triangle that has broken out here, which could possibly come back with a retest with a kind of confirmation at the upper edge, which is very typical, and I can imagine that the trend will continue to develop sustainably. And it is of course very, very nice to see when the larger AI projects are slowly but surely breaking out. We see a clear trend reversal that has taken place. We have sustainably broken through old interim highs at the current time of 2001, and therefore I can well imagine that the trend will continue to develop and that this entire momentum will be transferred to other projects that I have mentioned repeatedly on my YouTube channel, which are simply a bit smaller than, for example, protocols or something like Render. We have also seen that Render has risen from 440 to 740, which is also a very nice and positive sign when the bottom formation phase has officially ended. So one can really officially claim that this bottom formation phase is over. Can't really imagine that Render will come back below $4 during this bull run. We also see it here based on the current volume, so you need to take a look. There are simply increased signs that new liquidity is flowing into real projects. That's why we also see increased volume in all these projects. I really like Akash Network very much. I had already mentioned it back then. I believe it was even one of the first projects I introduced when it was at $0.50. So I am actually still invested, even though I honestly hardly mentioned it on my YouTube channel, but it is still a top project. It is, as I said, already at nearly 1 billion, which is somewhat larger, but I could also well imagine that with Akash Network we could rise again to a market cap of 10 billion and higher. So I also think there is still potential for 10x and more because a lot is being done right here. Akash Network has really developed very strongly. It is not for nothing in the top 100. It is simply a project that has already been partially recognized by the overall market, which is not necessarily at the very beginning like, for example, OpenGPU, and could theoretically show 100x potential, because I would say 100 billion is definitely exaggerated. Really can't imagine that. That's why I think a 5 to 15x is realistic for Akash Network. At the end of the day, it's always the question you have to personally ask yourself, how much risk can I take? What volatility can I handle in my own portfolio? And of course, what is my goal? People always ask me, hey Vincent, is it still worth investing in Solana? Is it still worth investing in Coin XY now? You have to be careful about how high the market cap is. What is your own goal? If 3x is enough for you, it's also fine to invest in Solana, but I would say my motto for this bull run is really to get the absolute maximum out, a 10, 15, 20, 25x. So those are my personal goals. Nothing below a 10x should really happen during this bull run. and you have to position yourself accordingly. You have to take risks accordingly. Want to make that clear to everyone here. Definitely be careful, especially with smaller projects. That's why I mentioned some larger projects in today's video, so you have some reference points, orientation points where you can possibly build your own anchor in the portfolio, especially with such projects. Otherwise, let's get to the actual core of today's video, which is to talk about the new niche of decentralized agents, because I see a clear trend here. Thus, we have one of the largest projects, of course, Fetch AI. So I would say, if we leave Fetch AI aside, it is the merger of other projects that also cover different industries. Virtual's protocol is thus the largest project, and what we can really see happening here is truly amazing. So here we already had this parabolic rise, and it's exactly the kind of chart I keep talking about in my YouTube videos. These are exactly the charts we want to catch. But of course, before the parabolic rise takes place, I can very well imagine such a chart for some real projects that I will talk about shortly, which are still at the beginning. As mentioned, Virtual Protocol has already been pumped. We currently have a market cap of $500 million. It might still be a good entry point from now, because I am sure that especially the blue chip projects, the largest projects, will continue to perform well, but still it just feels a bit off, and it doesn't feel particularly good to buy at the top. You feel a bit foolish, to be honest. That's why we will now talk about other projects that cover the same industry but have not been pumped yet. So that's also my strategy. When I recognize such a project, it's relatively obvious that there is a clear trend here, that liquidity is being concentrated in the larger projects, which sooner or later trickles down into the smaller projects. The very first project I want to mention today is Spectral AI, which has a current market cap of $130 million. It's neither a complete hidden gem that is just starting out, nor has it been significantly pumped yet. So $130 million is absolutely acceptable for this project, in my opinion, still undervalued. We can take a look at the chart. It looks relatively clean. We have returned to an original support level and still have higher interim lows and higher interim highs. So I can also imagine that this is a relatively good entry point. I really like the setup. As mentioned, decentralized AI agents is the keyword here, and we can take a look at the whole thing. These are simply autonomous agents that are brought onto the blockchain and can thus act decentralized. This is already a very significant use case that is present here. I would say there is already a certain substance in Spectral AI. I like it very much overall, except for the tokenomics, which is a small drawback in this case. A small red flag. We currently have a market cap of 140 million, but fully diluted, it's almost 1 billion, and there is certainly still quite a bit of inflation coming our way, so some token distributions. Therefore, be cautious here, but I still think that a good price performance will take place. Otherwise, the next project I'm very bullish on is actually HyperGPT with a market cap of 130 million. It's not just a project that solely covers decentralized AI agents, it's also a combination of AI infrastructure, as you can see here. But we have, as mentioned, covered the industry here. We can see it here in the category. HyperGPT is also represented among the top AI agent tokens. Therefore, it will certainly benefit more and more from this, provided that the trend continues to develop. That is, of course, the prerequisite. But if the trend remains, if the narrative continues, HyperGPT will sooner or later also benefit from it. That's why we can take another look at the chart. I really like it a lot. It also has some slight parallels to AI Tech, so it's a bit of the smaller project compared to AI Tech. However, I am also convinced about AI Tech. I didn't include it in today's video because it doesn't solely cover decentralized AI agents, but I would say that with HyperGPT that is the case, and I believe the parameters are right here. Strong partnerships are in place, and throughout the entire summer lull, results were delivered. Good tokenomics are also present. Fully diluted 50 million is absolutely acceptable, and there are still vesting phases in place here. So I really like it. As I said, I also have it in my own portfolio because quite a bit is covered here. We see here again the comparison to other projects, and we can also recognize that, as mentioned, it is a whole decentralized marketplace for AI applications. In this case, there are simply various factors coming together that speak for HyperGPT. Now we come to talk about the next project, namely Agent Layer, which is still completely at the beginning. This is really a play where one must be very cautious because it is still completely at the start. 2001, we also see here food diluted 4 and 30 million. One must be extremely careful. Several tokens are still coming into circulation because back then art node sales took place, and some token holders are still receiving their tokens at this time. So one must be careful, as mentioned, that there is no selling pressure, but the other parameters in this case are very good. I must say, it runs on the base chain, which in my opinion is also a great advantage because the base chain is generally very retail friendly and is gaining more and more popularity at the current time. We can take a look at the website. It is essentially a whole network, a fully decentralized network for AI agents, autonomous agents as it states here. And it is, of course, the best thing one can do when providing the infrastructure and not specifically offering AI agents for specific use cases, because there you usually have a kind of single value risk. In this case, however, you are betting on the entire infrastructure. If the overall industry continues to expand, the infrastructure will also grow. That is a logical conclusion. Also here on Twitter, the marketing is, in my opinion, very, very good. So I'm actually convinced here and I'm considering taking a small position. As mentioned, it is extremely high risk, 5 million, so be extremely careful. Yes, one must also observe how the chart behaves here. Yes, the big advantage we actually have is that it was only launched at the end of September, which I believe is a significant advantage over other projects that may have already participated in bull runs or that were also active over the summer lull, because when I look at other charts from an IT protocol or something else, which I am still convinced of, it is simply not particularly nice to see for investors when a sell-off has occurred of 70, 80, 90%, and so the chart in this case is simply still clean. It is relatively fresh. There are higher interim lows, higher interim highs, and it is definitely a big advantage for investors, for potential new investors, and generally, of course, for sentiment when higher highs are repeatedly reached, when no larger sell-offs occur. Even at the current time, this project is holding up relatively well. As mentioned, one must be careful. One must simply continue to observe how the further chart progression is, but if the project continues to remain stable, makes higher interim highs and higher interim lows, then I will definitely find an entry point here. As I said, I like it very much. You can also check the individual projects yourself. We'll not go into complete depth here because otherwise the video will exceed 1 hour. Then let's talk about the next project, which is incredibly high risk, so I even mentioned it on my YouTube channel back then, and Octavia has completely died, so you can see the chart. Normally I never include such projects in my own YouTube videos, and as I said, I am not paid or anything if it comes across incorrectly, but especially with such projects, it can sometimes happen that there is a complete explosion from one day to the next, that perhaps the bottom formation phase has been overcome, and that slowly but surely new volume is coming in. As I said, one must be careful. I would only go in with play money here, but we also cover the industry of decentralized agents, so basically decentralized AI assistants that we have on the blockchain, which can take on various tasks, and in this case, some delivery was made throughout the entire summer, so I have observed it a bit. We can also see it from the tweets. It is not completely current. We see here that there was also a month when nothing was posted. It is extremely high risk. Yes, one really has to be careful with such projects because it could even be a scam. Yes, I never really know at the end of the day, but especially with such projects, when hypes return, I have often experienced that such projects simply awaken from one day to the next, achieving 5 times or 10 times returns. What actually came to my mind is a project from back in 2021, which is also a similar example, namely Type AI. Everyone said Type AI has died, which is also a similar project that goes in a similar direction. We also have decentralized applications or the decentralized agent that can take on certain tasks. At the end of the day, it is always the same. So here we see what the agent can do. You can give this decentralized agent certain commands and it can execute certain things on the blockchain. It can execute transactions for you, etc. So it is also a very, very exciting project. Alex Becker actually pushed it back then, so I can still remember that. A few months ago, I can still recall, and here we have a similar chart progression. It has completely died in that sense, but a bottom formation phase has also taken place here. We can take a look at it on a monthly basis. There has already been a 130% increase. And this is just what I mentioned earlier. It can very well be that certain projects really awaken from one day to the next and also come back. It is quite possible that Type AI returns to the market cap area of several hundred million. Yes, of course, it is very speculative and very high risk because you can never really weigh whether there is real substance behind the project or if at the end of the day only a website was created to generate FOMO and hype. So one must be careful, of course. Also, in this case, there are still no exchange listings available, which is a red flag in itself, but such projects can certainly awaken from the ground up from one day to the next, and then you can relatively quickly take some profits in the short term. As I said, it is very high risk, but I still wanted to include it in today's video. Then the next project, namely Sensei, I mentioned in one of the last videos. So the video came out 12 days ago and was very well received by you. I mentioned it here at a 13 million market cap. In this case, at a price of 0.0014 ounce, it has also been pumped very well. So happy profits to each of you who took advantage of this opportunity. I also said back then, 12 days ago in the video, that in my opinion the bottom is in here, that we have received confirmation, so that was the last video, that we can now continue the breakout with higher interim lows and higher interim highs. So I can well imagine that Sensei will continue to perform well. As I said, I am also very convinced, otherwise feel free to check out the other videos for more details regarding the projects. Then 01 Labs, now we are starting to talk a bit about the old players that I keep mentioning in my YouTube videos. These are, as I said, one of my favorite projects, and in this case I am also very heavily invested myself. Just want to mention this for transparency reasons, so you know whether I am invested or not. Otherwise, it should also be said that I am not being paid by the projects to say anything good, but I am simply convinced of 01 Labs. It is a kind of competitor to Bittens, and with a market cap of 60 million, in my opinion, it is an absolute joke, especially when we look at how high Bittens is currently standing in the multi-billion range. So I can well imagine that there is a really solid competitor project here. Also, the partnerships that are in place are really delivering continuously. Of course, we also have the similar problem here that the fully diluted market capitalization is significantly higher. Some tokens are still coming into circulation, but here we also have good vesting and cliff phases, which in my opinion makes it legitimate to invest here, where I can still well imagine that a decent performance will take place. Even if there are still a few token distributions happening over the coming weeks and months, it's not the case that suddenly tomorrow the supply will double. It's not that drastic in this case. At this point, one must always weigh things clearly and always check. So do your own research, look at the white paper, examine the tokenomics, and look at the cliff and vesting phases, meaning what kind of inflation still affects this project. And here, in my opinion, it is completely fine 2001, so I am not worried at all, which is why I am also well invested here. Then the next project is Paul AI. I think everyone has heard about it, and personally, it has also excited me incredibly because I am personally invested in Paul AI. And what is happening here is really an absolute joke, actually. I find it almost a disgrace what has happened here with Paul AI. And here there was an attempt to merge with Fetch AI, essentially with another crypto project to join forces at the end of the day. But of course, this whole thing did not please the investors at all, because naturally, if you invest in Paul AI, you want to hold Paul AI and not somehow a merger with Fetch AI and 3 or 4 other projects. That's why it personally upset me a lot, as well as the other investors. In my opinion, it is not justified to panic like that. Also here, if we look at the sell-off, it was really severe, from 30 US cents back down to 8 cents. So it's really intense what has happened, how the market has overreacted. We have now also come back from the bottom with a 2-fold increase. Personally, to be honest, I didn't dare to buy in here because I couldn't assess how the further negotiations would go the further votes took place. Now, at the end of the day, a brief context for those of you who missed it, there was a vote, the community was allowed to vote on whether a merger would take place or not. And of course, the community decided against it. Who wants a merger here? At the end of the day, we all want to make our profits with Paul AI, and I would say Paul AI is also a top project, so the project has substance. I still like it very much. But when such things happen, it doesn't look particularly good on the chart and certainly doesn't cast a good light on the team behind it when such moves are made, because at the end of the day, no one knows if insider trading has taken place. It is also quite possible that some insiders positioned themselves well in advance, took profits with some short positions, exploited the panic on the way down, bought heavily, built up large long positions, and now we are back up here. So I can well imagine that this was simply insider trading, and it certainly does not cast a good light on Paul AI. Personally, I remain invested, but I am considering slowly but surely selling my position soon because it has personally upset me. However, in my opinion, the market has overreacted in this case. We are still 50% below the value we had back then. Therefore, in my view, it might even be a good buying opportunity. It is relatively risky, of course, but in my opinion, there is no longer any reason for concern because everything is right with the project at the end of the day. So the team remains transparent. They have also clearly expressed themselves on Twitter, Art has apologized, and has initiated some buybacks, essentially taking their own liquidity into their hands. You can also check it later on the Twitter account, but efforts have been made to ensure that the token continues to stabilize and that some liquidity has been added. Then the next project we will briefly talk about is Susanna, also in the deep sector, similar to Akash Network and Render. I can also well imagine that, simply because Dana runs on the Solana blockchain, there is a certain advantage here, as there is currently an incredible amount of liquidity on Solana in general. So we can take a look. I had also prepared something on my Twitter account. Currently we see on-chain that Solana dominates all other blockchains. Ethereum feels like it is absolutely dying. Not much is happening with Ethereum anymore, and Solana is really leading in any metric we look at on the blockchain. I also had other charts prepared here. We can see that a lot is happening on Solana at the moment. I can also well imagine that an art shift is taking place where many new crypto projects prefer to build on Solana now, including utility projects, not just meme coins, but also good existing projects with utility. I could imagine that there is a kind of switch happening, with some moving to the base chain or the Solana blockchain, as it is partly more retail friendly. Therefore, this is a small advantage for Nosana, a kind of unique selling point that other deep projects do not have. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge advantage, but it is definitely good that it is being built on the right blockchain. Otherwise, the next project I mentioned in the last videos has a beautiful accumulation phase. When I look at the chart in this case, I can also well imagine that a breakout will happen soon with a market cap of 80 million. We are also on Solana here, which I believe is an advantage. Then Neural AI, absolutely pumped up. I am still invested and still very convinced. I can really imagine that Neural AI will become one of the top AI projects in the future, and that we will easily reach the multi-billion range. So I think there is still tremendous potential at this point. It is one of my favorites and one of my largest projects in my own portfolio. Just so you know, I will only briefly touch on the projects, as I think you already know which projects I am invested in. They are always exactly the altcoins that I repeatedly present on my YouTube channel. Otherwise, I can also well imagine that Network will have another breakout soon. It is also one of my top projects in the DeFi sector, a major competitor to Render. When I look at Render, it is already in the multi-billion market cap range, and Destroy will certainly follow suit. OpenGPU, my absolute favorite project in the DeFi sector, seems to be slowly but surely awakening strongly again. With the current price of 1, we can see that a breakout is slowly but surely taking place. I think as soon as higher interim highs are reached, like back then at 1.53, we will quickly reach 2, 3.05, or $10. So this is really one of the projects where I could genuinely imagine a 50 to 100x happening. As I said, be extremely careful. I am not paid by OpenGPU, but I still want to mention it again. Still convinced and still heavily invested. Otherwise, the next project is GLQ, also an absolute hidden gem. Satbime once. In this case, we have the use case that we can create our own codes without even being able to code. So we can imagine it like ChatGPT, where we enter a prompt and in this case, we get entire codes generated. It is a gigantic use case where a market cap in the multi-billion range could also occur. A lot has also happened here over the summer lull, and I can also well imagine that GLQ will be one of the big beneficiaries of the upcoming AI hype. Otherwise, that's it for today's video. I hope you have gained a good overview of all the projects, including some decentralized agent projects where a new trend may emerge. Personally, I have positioned myself very strongly again and have bought up several altcoins significantly. In my opinion, we are just before this parabolic upswing, therefore it really requires a lot of patience here. Truly patient, especially in the current market phase. It will definitely pay off in the coming days and weeks. In my opinion, the altcoin season starts around the end of December, January, February. So slowly but surely everything is currently being initiated. Parallels are alarmingly similar to the last cycle. When I simply look at the last cycle, 2020-21, and compare it with the current cycle, then the altcoins should approximately take place at the end of December, January, February, March. In that time frame, it is the most likely in my opinion. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's video. As I said, I made the effort to set up everything for you, even though I didn't sleep last night. So I really had a lot to do, was busy with the flight here, and have just arrived fresh in Dubai. That's why you will receive videos in the coming days from the new setup. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Otherwise, feel free to join the expert group that I have just launched. Over 150 people are already in my inner circle, so a big thank you goes out at this point as well. Then I would say, see you in the next video.